Hello, Dianna Effner here, back in the studio. I'm getting ready to demonstrate how I would make a pair of shoes. This pair of shoes is your typical factory-made shoes, and I have here another pair of shoes that were made here in the studio by me, and I want to show you my method for making these shoes and show you how you can design shoes for any particular doll following my method. So first let's kind of get a look at how they're shaped compared to the factory shoe. My idea was to make them look more like people shoes, give them a more streamlined look and really a better fit, a better shape. And I used hardy clay to shape the foundation of the shoe, and then the upper part is made from a fine silk fabric, and the sole is actually made also from a type of clay, air dry clay, similar to hardy clay, but a little bit heavier and a little more flexible than hardy clay. So I'm going to be back in a minute to show you how we're going to get started making the shoes. The upper part of these shoes is made of fabric. It's going to be actually 3 layers of a very thin fabric. This is silk satin georgette, which is very thin, somewhat sheer, but also, I mean, you can see through it, but it's not too sheer. It's just about right for what we're going to do, but it has a matte side and a shinier satiny side, so you can use whichever one you prefer, depending on how you construct the shoes. And we're going to form the shoes over an actual pair of legs. And before we start making the upper part, the fabric part of the shoe, we're going to begin with the insole, and we're going to build, after the insole dries, then we're going to build the shape that we want for the toe of the shoe. That'll give us an under foundation that we can glue the fabric to. So I'm going to start by creating an insole shape, and I've taken my shape from studying actual people shoes and shaping it like a shoe rather than like this foot, which is what I think they do when they make the factory shoes, that they shape it just like the foot. So I'm going to add a little bit at the end to create this nice tapered shape. So I'll be back in a minute to show you how to create the insole for your shoe. Okay, I've got my pattern piece to make the insole for the shoe, and for my pattern pieces I like to use a material called Duralar. It's an acetate type of material, but it has a matte, this kind has a matte surface, and it has a little bit of stiffness to it, and it's sheer. You can see through it, so it's like tracing paper, but it doesn't tear like tracing paper, and it's stiff enough that you can actually, if you need to, use it to trace around. That's often handy, and then you can draw on it with a pencil. So to prepare the legs, I want to use these little things. They're called finger cuts. Therefore, if you cut your finger, you can get these in the drugstore where you buy Band-Aids, and they come in a package with different little different sizes. There's medium, or small, medium, and large. And I believe this is the small, which is going to be just about right, I think, for this size of a foot. And I can attach the clay to this, and then I'll be able to take it off easily. If you're going to make a pair of shoes that's going to be worn over tights or socks, you need to put a pair of tights or socks on the legs before you put these finger cots on, because this is really a precise fit. If you try to put these shoes on with socks, they're not going to fit, because this really makes shoes that are very precise fit. Okay, now I've got my clay. It's kind of an off-white because I'm going to use, it sort of goes with the fabric. Now I often use a pastry machine, a pastry maker, which is actually made, it's now called a clay machine, but it's like the old pasta machines. But if you don't have one of those, you can roll the clay with a roller. And Patico has these plastic sheets available that gives you something to roll on that can the clay can easily be removed. And it also keeps the clay from drying out when it's in between the two sheets. Now, if your clay is too wet, it will be a little bit difficult to remove from the plastic, but this clay is, I think it's pretty good for what we're doing. Uh-oh, maybe it's a little sticky. I think it's a little too thick yet for the insoles. If it's too wet and it wants to stick, I think you just need to let it air dry a little bit. See, there's a sticky spot right here. We don't need this much clay, so I can cut my insoles from the part that's not damaged. Okay. Now there's different ways you can cut the clay. It's very easy to cut. One way is to use some scissors. I'm going to put the other piece of plastic over this to keep it from drying out while I'm working on this shoe. This clay is going to dry on here overnight. And then I'm going to build up this area after this bottom piece has become dry and stiff. And there is a tendency for this part here to curl back as it dries. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find something to rest the foot against so that it is it's standing like the foot is rocked forward just slightly. And I'm going to stand it against this this bottle. And I'm going to put a little piece of clay under the heel to keep it in that position. Make sure you don't, the clay is fairly dry so it doesn't stick to the other clay. Another way to cut clay that I like to use sometimes is just to take a straight pin and just drag it through the clay. Sometimes I put a little bit of water on the bottom of the foot if this doesn't seem like it's going to want to stick, but the water can actually make it stick a little bit too much. So if it doesn't need water, if I don't feel like it needs water to make it stick, I'm not going to add it. Now I can do more shaping after the insole is dry tomorrow. And I'll use a little bit of this clay to create a temporary sort of like a heel to stand this foot. Stand this foot up so that the toe is turned up slightly. Like so. Okay, now it's next morning and I'm ready to start the next step of building the foundation for my shoes. The hardy clay is dry enough to work with. I can do a little bit of shaping around the toe to get the shape I want. Try to get them looking close to the same shape and size. Now what I want to do next is to fill in this area that's like a gap and blend it up into the toes. I don't want to add a lot of bulk, but just fill in and smooth out this area where the toe of the shoe will be. So I'm just going to take a really small piece of clay . About like that. I'm just going to grab a brush here. I've got some water. Hardy clay sticks to itself really well if you just put a little bit of water. I think that might be a little bit too big. Just fit it right here. And then so I haven't added, just added enough to make a nice toe for my shoe. I don't want a big bulge here on this shoe because that's not the kind of shoe I'm making. Just a little bit of clay, that's all it takes. Okay. Okay, that feels about right. Okay. I like to put a little bit on the heel. I don't always do this, but I've been doing it because it gives a little bit more shape to the heel, but mainly it gives you something to glue that shoe on when you're putting the cloth upper part on. So you don't want to get it too thick because you don't want a distorted looking foot. So I'm gonna just make kind of a round shape here. And then I cut it in half, and I've got 2 pieces to put on the back of the heel. And put a little bit of water along here. Okay, now these need to dry until I'm ready to glue the upper part of the shoe. Meanwhile, I'll be working on sewing the upper part Be back soon.